Hey, it's Jeremy Kirkland. You're listening to Blammo. How are you doing? How are we all doing? We hanging in there? We doing all right? Did everyone have a very interesting holiday weekend? Hopefully nobody ate too many hot dogs or blew off their hand with fireworks. I mean, I don't know. Maybe you're the person who does fireworks. Maybe you're the person who watches it. Maybe you do both. We did little fireworks with the kids, you know. Put a ginormous rocket in my kid's hand, lit it on fire. No, I'm totally kidding. But it was good. It was good. I was in Kansas City, brought the kids out there, had a little holiday weekend with the fam. It was great. I will say it was a little bit of a kind of a whiplash effect because I had just gotten back from Paris like a couple days before from the men's shows. By the way, if you want to hear about that stuff, I did a solo pod on it on the Patreon. Also, there's a new Triple J episode where we talk about the Paris Fashion Week stuff there. Highly recommend it. Dig into that. But let's get into it because this week, look, I talk about this a lot, and you've heard me talk about, oh, this is a good episode. This is a really good episode. Okay, it's good. I like it a lot. It's Jon Klassen, who is. Well, he's an illustrator, he's an author. He's kind of like, oh man, I'm almost cringing as I say this, okay? But he's kind of like a philosopher in a way. So I met him years ago through Mac Barnett. And weirdly enough, I was in Copenhagen on a trip, and he was there too. Just a total coincidence. And so we got to hang out and spend some time together and go to museums. And it was a ton of fun, but it's also interesting when you get to be around a person, especially like a person that you like an artist, and then watch the artist look at art. And first off, I feel like that needs to be a TV show where it's just like, watch this artist look at art and then try to see the things that they're interested in. And it was a cool way to get to know him because we were in Copenhagen. I think we went to the Design Museum. So we're like looking at chairs and stuff. And it was just the stuff that he gravitated to. Look, I love art. I love artists even more. But it was very eye-opening to me. But we talk about that sort of stuff on here because, look, when people talk about children's books, they usually talk about what they teach. And Jon is more interested in what they've left unsaid. If that makes sense, right? I mean, I had this bullet point in my head of like, how do I summarize a person of this magnitude? But he's become one of the most celebrated authors and illustrators working today. He recently received the Astrid Lindgren Memorial Award, which is the world's largest prize for children's literature. But our conversation doesn't hang on books and art too long. We talk about why kids deserve stories. We talk about why you shouldn't explain everything, the role of ambiguity in art. And yeah, of course we freaking talk about clothes. We get into running and menswear, creative insecurity. Hello. It's all in there. This was just a great pod. I'm so excited to bring this to you. So here's my chat with Jon Klassen. So you went and won this like huge award. I mean, this was a huge deal.
It was, yeah, it got huger the more I went, the more I found out about it. I knew it was big, but it was one of those, it was for children's books. It's called the Astrid Lindgren Memorial Award. And it's given out by the Swedish Arts Council and the government and the royal family over there, like it's just like a national award. It was so distant. When they called me to tell me I'd gotten it, it was at the Bologna Book Festival, but I wasn't there. I was home in bed in Los Angeles. And apparently it was like, they all had all these digital screens that had my face on them all of a sudden at the festival. And the whole thing just seemed like a dream. It seemed like that didn't happen. None of that happened. And then we got on a plane, the whole family, and went to Stockholm to receive it. And again, it felt like it was so surreal as to, my brain was like, this may not be happening. Like that's the best way we have of processing this, is that like the part of my brain that kind of checks out, when things get a little bit too surreal, checked out like immediately after we got on the plane.
Yeah.
And any sort of experience I have with like literary awards ceremonies and stuff like that have been, that they give out things to a lot of people on the night of the thing. And this was just my stuff. This was just my name on the stage. And it was like, I don't know. It was a very surreal thing. This job is very, not lonely, but you spend a lot of time by yourself. You're in your little cave working on your books, and the swing between that and the ultra social stuff, even if it's book tour, but especially something like that, where you're in a suit and you're up on stage and you're talking about yourself, and there's literally the crown princess of Sweden sitting there. You're just like, I don't know how these two things connect. I don't understand how drawing bears in hats connects with this. It doesn't make sense. But it was a very nice not making sense. It was, as long as things aren't going to make sense, that's the way to do it.
I mean, for listeners, there is a video of your speech on their site, and I watched your speech a couple times, and it's really good, because I think, I mean, I'm not going to put words in your mouth, but to kind of paraphrase some of the stuff you talked about, you talked about the importance, and your friend Mac discusses this as well, who's also, our mutual friend.
Mm-hmm.
You talk about the importance of challenging kids and challenging people within your writing and creating opportunities for people to think more about the stuff that you're putting out. And I say this too because, I go to my son's parents' reading thing every few months or so. And I usually bring books to read in Russ's class. He's 3. And I've seen other parents there, and they'll bring, this book, and it's like, hey, the banana got into a fight, and the banana knew that it was important to be kind, and everybody should be a banana, ha ha ha, and then I read Circle, Triangle, Square. And for listeners, you should also read it. As an adult, you should read it. In each of the book, it doesn't really explain everything, and it relies on kids' imagination. And, for example, there's a scene in the book, one of the characters goes behind a waterfall, and you don't know who they see behind the waterfall, but you pose the question to the kids. And I saw all of the kids, when I'm reading it to them, they're guessing and they're shouting out, well, maybe it's this or maybe it's this. And there's also things that happen in the book that are like, oh, well, that didn't really resolve. Like there's, so you create these big environments for kids in your book that I think is much more similar to what real life is than these like tightly wrapped bows of, these parables of kindness that may not land the plane so much as helping people learn how to think. I will step off my soapbox now. No,
I think I had books that was the banana learning to share when I was younger, and I loved some of them. So I don't think that that's necessarily the wrong approach for people who find creative opportunity there. I think that for people who do that well, who can make books like that be engaging and entertaining, I think there's tons of room for that stuff. I think that my approach, I don't know how to do that. I'm not interested in it creatively. And so I think that if there's one thing we've noticed, Mac and I, and me on my own, noticed about books for kids, or books that kids seem to love, there are books that kids love that I know that they love, or that like a lot of them love anyway, but I don't like. I'm not interested in them. But you can usually tell that the person who made that book was into it. Whether the topic or the approach or if there's a moral, or whether that was interesting to them is the main thing, is that the kids can tell when the person who made the thing was into it, making it, the act of making it. And so whatever that leads to, I think is the thing to watch out for. If it turns out it leads to you making a sharing banana, if you can do that, and if you're into that as the person making it and challenging yourself and reaching the end of whatever it is you're able to do, that seems to be what kids are mainly looking to connect with. It feels like my stuff, it turns out, I feel like so much of the air in my stuff, whatever's left, or the negative space that I don't say or don't draw, it wasn't necessarily calculated for inference for the audience, or some sort of you know what I mean? Like there's those words that people use for kids things where they're like, oh, well, this leaves so much. It's stuff I can't either. I don't know how to draw or write, or stuff I can't bear to write or draw. I'm too sensitive to actually get it down. And so I stop short of saying the thing. And so it's all on my end. It's not calculated to be like, oh, well, the audience is really going to run with this. I literally either can't or don't want to. I'm stubborn that way. And the result, luckily, has been that it leaves space for the audience to inhabit and to bring their own thing to it. But if I find myself calculating that too hard, to be like, oh, I'm going to let the audience run with this conclusion, there's something a little too calculated in it. Where if I come by it honestly, if I'm like, I can't bear to go any further, I have to leave it here, and then hopefully we'll understand where this moment was. And the rest of it that's too hard for me to say, everyone's been there. It's just that they can fill that part in themselves, but it'll be the same thing. I never want to leave it so that it's ambiguous what I am trying to say or what I almost wanted to say, but the actual language of it, or how it is the audience might say that to themselves, ought to be, or at least it turns out it works to leave it to be themselves, talking to themselves about that last moment.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like you're saying a lot of these situations happen more because of circumstance versus an intentional, deliberate decision.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
To leave that vagueness in there.
Yeah, you thought you could write it, or there's not even a plan. I think my favorite stuff comes when there wasn't quite a plan. You had a premise, but you weren't quite sure where it was going to go. And you have characters that you kind of begin to believe in, or they're breathing on their own. But you in the better times, you get to the moment where you're not quite sure how to put it, and you're not quite sure what even you're trying to say. And so you either leave it silent and have them do something visually, or even if you can't show that, you move the camera altogether, or you do it over a page turn where you didn't have to draw it. The moment happened between page 3 and 4, or page 47 and 48, or whatever moment that is, and it just happened in between. It wasn't in you to show it. And I think that even kids recognize that. There's an acknowledgement somehow of the limits of language, or the limits of your ability to draw it, the limits of our own way of expressing ourselves, that I really relate to when I see it. And I'm not, kids don't necessarily put it this way, but hopefully that's what's coming across, is that the connection is actually in the admission that you can't say any more than that. And hopefully there's an understanding there. Yeah.
Where did that sort of characteristic come from? Because, I mean, I think the other thing, the thread that we're kind of pulling out a bit here is, when you go to school and you learn how to become a storyteller or an artist, so much of the storytelling is about connecting all these dots and showing, the hero's journey, for example, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or, so things where it's like, okay, there's person wants something, person sees problem, person changes, person, gets the thing. And I'm not saying all your stories are like this, but it's almost like against what most people will learn when they're going to school, learning how to write stories, by just not saying everything. And I think for me, that was one of the things when I first read some of your books, because, for the record, you primarily write books for children, but they're books that me as an adult will go back and reread, like, alone, because there's something there that I'm like, I want to understand this better. And there's,
well, that means a lot to hear that you do that. And I don't know where it started. I think that I was always a super sensitive reader and watcher of things, movies and shows and stuff like that. Like, I would, my bar was very low for wanting to walk out of the room or turn it off. And it wasn't necessarily for being scared or for, I put it this way to somebody a little while ago, and she was surprised to hear this way of saying it. I remember talking about scary movies when I was a kid, which we weren't allowed to watch very often. So that was part of it too, is that your limited exposure suddenly when you do get to watch something scary or something a little ahead of where you thought you were at. But I remember even very young, I remember being angry and mystified that someone had made the thing I was watching. It wasn't the thing itself. I was really depressed and I felt lonely that someone had taken the time to create the thing that was supposed to do what it was doing to me. There was something about humanity or people or what the world was going to be like as I got older, because I was a kid when this would start to happen. And it was depressing me that way. It was like, is this what we're all, like, who wants to do this? Who made this? Who took the time?
What was it?
I don't even, it could have been anything. It was anything I disagreed, anything that scared me. That was the process, was that first it would scare you quickly or just bum you out or mystify you by by something. And it could have been something that was actually, I was taking too seriously, and I just hadn't had enough exposure. But I remember it wasn't the thing itself. It was always like, who did this? Like, why? And like, I wanted the motive. And so I think that so much of what I can't do now, or what I refuse to go any further with, you just don't want to you want to show them an example of someone who didn't do that or who didn't, I don't know. There's a strange promise that you're trying to keep intact to the kids about like what it is you can retain or what it is you're trying to retain as an adult, and remember about the things you used to value or the things that scared you too badly or the things that confused you. And it's not that you have to ignore that those things exist. It's just that you don't have to own them. You don't have to make a structure that agrees with them somehow. You can just stand there and look at them and you don't even know how to put it. That's, I think, where it seems to end, is that like, you don't have words for them, but I don't even want to give them words. They don't deserve words, some of the things that scare us or some of the things that, are mystifying to us. We don't have to internalize them that way. They do exist. It's important that we don't ignore them. But I don't know, giving them language and giving them words and names, it just feels offensive somehow. And so you stop short of that, but you still try to imply that they exist. That's the thing, is that you're not making a book where none of this happens. But the motivations and the reasons why and how you get there and how you find yourself there sometimes, they're not really understandable a lot of the time. And that's a big part of my books too, is that the lack of understanding about how even the main characters themselves or you yourself come to find yourself doing something. Why does that happen? Yeah. It's not my business to know. I don't have the answer to that, but it happens. And even just the acknowledgement that it happens, just to say that it does, is enough of a reason, especially for a shorter book. That's why I think I like children's books so much, or at least one of the reasons, is that they're allowed to be that short. In something longer, you'd have time to, get into it. But I love the size of a children's book to be like, it happens.
Yeah.
Page 30, page 32. And then you close the book. And like that to me feels like an ending. And it feels like a reason enough to make something, is that just to say it happens. And we're out. I don't know. And I'm not sure. I'm surprised to find that it works, because it doesn't, you say it like that, it doesn't really sound like it could lead to a complete thought. And the trick is to see if you can make it feel like one.
Yeah. I mean, you have this book, The Rock from the Sky. And I've read it, I don't know, probably close to 100 times. And because it's my son's favorite book. He loves to read it. But, for listeners, first off, you have to read the book. And it's also, this is separate from the fact that the books themselves are designed exceptionally well, that it's worth owning. But I don't want to go down that road this second. But in the book, weird stuff happens.
Yeah.
And, my son was like, oh, are the people that come, for spoiler, there's like aliens, essentially.
There's an alien. Well, there's something. Yeah. It's not saying, yeah.
And he's like, are they good or are they bad? And I was like, well, I don't know. I was like, I mean, it depends on, I was like, it looks like they're just trying to figure things out. I was like, oh, this was destroyed. I don't know. And he's like, well, maybe they're bad. And I was like, oh, okay. And he's like, well, but maybe they're good to themselves. And I'm like, what the fuck? My kid's putting this stuff together.
Nice. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. We just watched, this weekend went to see Princess Mononoke they had a screening of it at the theater, and we'd seen it before, but the kids were, my kids are 7 and 9, and they'd watched it once before. And we went to see it again because it was on this big screen, and I hadn't seen it in a little while, not since they saw it. And they were, eons older than they were before. And we left, and my 9-year-old said, I don't know who was good. And I said, I know. I did the same thing. Like, your allegiances at best change like 7 times. You're trying so hard to organize this because we want to, I guess. And I was going back and forth on this. Miyazaki's movies are so interesting for this because they are so murky that way. Even when they purport to be cleaner than that, there is often, if you dig down on them, a real gray area about who's actually, if you are asked to organize them that way, it's hard to do. And that one is super overt, being like, who are we meant to agree with here? I'm being sent so many signals. And I love that. I'm not sure dramatically how satisfying it is. It's 2 different questions, right? Like, can you get dramatic satisfaction out of never taking a side? I'm so interested in that question. I think I've always been. I think that you can. It's just hard, or at least for me, it's hard. But I'm much more interested in that than setting up a good and a bad and letting the good win, or letting the bad win and calling it a tragedy, or whatever it is. Like, that seems, I don't know what to do with that. I don't know what I bring to that. Whereas I'm much more confused with the world than that also. And so just somehow Rock from the Sky is about being confused and being like kind of acknowledging the lack of control that we have, but still having weird friend fights, even though you've got no control over your external circumstance, or at least very little, right? I don't know. The older I get, the more it's like, I'm mainly in the business of reacting here. And that ought to be the baseline feeling is that like, let's not pretend I'm in charge. I can do my best to react to what we're handed. But that book is sort of about that feeling, is that like you have these back and forth exchanges that I really wanted to write. I love writing these weird, dumb conversations between characters. But at any moment, a giant rock might fall on you. And what does that do to your day? Can you allow it to change your day? Is it supposed to? Once one rock has fallen, what then? What do you know? How do we know, to move forward? Can you? And then you do. And just, there's no explanations, but that is kind of how it feels, especially for kids too, who are largely in the business of reacting just the same, right? We talk about stories for kids about being friends and stuff, but like putting my kids into school, it was like, well, they have friends because of, the choices that they have here. There's 30 kids in the class. They didn't choose any of them, but they're going to make the best of it. They're going to find a couple ones that are better than the other ones for them. And that's just reaction, The Shapes books that you mentioned, we went out of our way never to say that they were friends, because as far as our conception goes, they're just these three creatures who just live in pretty close proximity to each other. They do enjoy hanging out, but our interest was much more in like, how does a neighbor conversation feel? Much more than like friends who you've chosen to spend the evening with. That's a different conversation over the fence or down the street, or like even parents whose kids happen to be in the same class. What's that conversation like? Versus like, oh, I really want to see you again. Let's have a drink, right? Like, I don't want to hear that conversation. I'm sure you do like each other, but how do I negotiate? But how do I negotiate the guy next door, right? Like, what is that? That's much more fun to write. And kids know those conversations. They know those. They're put in rooms with other kids they don't know all the time. They're aware of this like weird distant relationship where they're like, "What's your name?" "Well, my name's Brandon." That's cool. Like, where'd you get those shoes? Like, what are you supposed to talk about? What are you supposed to do? Like, play with these guys for an hour. We're going to go over here. Like, those conversations should be so funny, or they could be. And this just is, you're not in control. You just have to deal with Brandon now. Yeah.
Well, you tackle humor in a way that I think is very, very highbrow now. Let's be honest. I mean, it is, it's like you and Tim Robinson and how you guys explore humor in the sense that, like, first off, it never looks like it's trying to be funny. Like, I don't look at your books and I'm like, oh, this is a comedy, but you see the situations that occur. And also from getting to know you, I'm like, oh, dude, Jon is fucking hilarious.
I don't know if we should bill it that way and then have me listen to talk for an hour. I'm not gonna live up to that kind of thing.
No, but I think you point out the humor in the things that can feel mundane.
I think that, well, yeah, and I think maybe that some of that is Canadian too. I think a lot of humor that I grew up with and that I still see coming from Canada feels like it's tackling mundanity. What's the noun? Mundanity?
I don't know.
But there is that kind of feeling of like staring at a snowy horizon and making a joke of it rather than being, terrified by the abyss. You're just on the edge. I don't know. There's something about the space up there that lends itself to a certain kind of straight-faced humor. But there is, I find I'm funniest, or at least in the writing, I'm happy with it when I'm a little bit angry at something, and when that anger is clarified, even a little bit, at something in particular. And it doesn't mean it comes out in the books. I don't want the books to feel angry. I don't want the children to feel like I'm angry. But I do feel like it's back there somewhere where you're like, I'm mad at something, so let's make fun of it, or let's explore it and say how ridiculous it is. And it's like a defense mechanism too. Your limits with language and your limits with understanding the world. It's funny as well as everything else.
Yeah, I mean, you have quite a few books that you've published, and I mean, when did you start to realize that while primarily people are viewing you as a, quote, children's book author and illustrator, that what you put out wasn't just for kids?
I don't know that I have. I think that I really love the constraints that writing for children gives you creatively. I really get a kick out of making sure that whether or not they understand my aesthetic or like what I'm trying to do, creatively, I like it if a 2-year-old can understand the plot or the problem, right? And that's a challenge. That's a creative challenge of its own, to be like, how do I make this so clear that even a pre-verbal kid can be like, that's the problem. He wants his hat back. This book better end with someone wearing a hat.
Yeah.
And keeping that as clean as possible. And so once you're inside that, but it's a good safety mechanism for me too, because then you've satisfied this which is hard to do, communicate something visually so cleanly, right? And once I have that to fall back on, then I can get a little weird with it, or like do my own stuff that I'm not even sure is working, but you can move around, but you're like, but the bear's wearing a hat on page 32. Like, we do know that. We got to get there somehow. And like, but that's such a great, so I think, I don't know what I would do if I didn't have that in the background, to be like, a 2-year-old's got to get it. And so they are for kids, I think. And they're for me as a kid. And they are but I don't think about children specifically. You can't. It's like thinking about people anyway. That's what you learn, is that like all these kids are so different. Some of them are going to like the book, but you can't think about kids in a general way when you're making it. You can kind of guess at what is simple enough for a 2-year-old to get. But I don't find myself thinking about children a ton. I think about how to make it as simple as possible and clean as possible. And then you have to just kind of trust that you are the kind of person that is going to make something that kids are going to enjoy, hopefully, and not be scared of or weirded out by.
Well, so with that being said, when you're writing, are you writing for yourself?
Yeah. Whatever that means. Yeah, for sure. I think that, and again, kids notice that. I think you got to do it for yourself. If you do it for them, they smell it and they walk away. And so as long as you have to be writing for yourself. I don't know all the layers, because of course you know that it's going to be a children's book. You have that in your head as a form. And so you're writing to that too. You're writing for the form.
Right.
But you're trying to do your best inside that form, I guess. Yeah. Does that make sense?
It makes perfect sense. I think, I think oftentimes for me, when I think of the work that I'm doing, I'm like, okay. And this is something I just wrestle with as a person who makes stuff that people consume. Yeah. Oftentimes I really run out of gas to make things for myself or to find joy or simple pleasures for myself.
I've almost never done it. I've almost never made things for myself. I'm only starting to figure out now in the last couple of years what that even looks like to begin. And it feels so strange to do it. I always needed a brief or a job. I always needed a job. I wanted this to be a job. I'd much rather be a professional with a job than someone who's viewed as an artist or someone who has something to say or express. I just want to be really good at my job. I've always wanted that angle on it. And that's why I don't think I have many ideas or like it's a formal exercise. You are given a form, which is in this case, the children's book or the board book or the chapter book or whatever it happens to be. And you do your best inside that particular set of constraints that it presents. And you find you have lots to say as soon as you begin to open that up and analyze it. Then those things come out. But I don't go into it being like, gosh, I wish I could analyze what it feels like to be whatever it is. I wouldn't know where to start. I think it starts with the form, and then whatever you're thinking about or being angry at or whatever it is comes out. For me, it does.
Who taught you that? Because I don't think that's natural.
What, to start with the form?
Yeah, but I think also, you talked about how you just want to have a job.
Yeah.
But if you just want to have a job, there's about 500 billion other things you could do than something as niche as this.
I can't. I think that was the tricky bit, is that I felt like I don't think I could. That's the scary part, is that like I couldn't fix cars or make chairs, maybe if I'd learned how. But I knew it didn't come naturally. This came naturally, I guess. Drawing and writing felt familiar. I just felt like I knew where the levers were and stuff. And not in a way where I was owed anything. I think that's where it gets tricky too, is that like, the world doesn't owe you an outlet then once you figured out you can draw or like to write. And so you want to earn it. I think that's the thing, is I never felt like I deserved any of this stuff or someone's time just because I did some things that some people liked. It's like, you want to earn that time. You want to like, all right, you've given me a space on the shelf and these 10 minutes it takes to read this, I'll do the best I can. Mm. I don't know where that came from. I think that I didn't grow up knowing people who did creative work, or certainly not like artist types. We didn't have any of those people around. And so we were surrounded by people with jobs. And I just wanted to fit in with a job. And I was so scared that I wasn't finding anything that was going to do that, until I remember seeing the Disney stuff. When we were kids in the 90s, they were making, Little Mermaid and Beauty and the Beast and stuff. And they came with all this extra footage of animators at desks flipping paper and looking at references and making faces into mirrors and stuff. But I was so excited because suddenly here was a person with a desk who looked like they had a job and a parking space. And I was like, oh, good. Great. So this thing that I'm doing, I don't have to find myself at all. I don't have to be an artist and live in Paris. I can I can go to Toronto and draw on paper, but still have a job and an apartment and a chair. And like, you know what I mean? Like just that. I just wanted a house with a job, and I could back this into that. Yeah.
And then you, in a way, you got that, right? Because you worked with Henry Selick early on.
I went to animation school. I went to a college to learn how to animate, and it turned out I was a terrible animator, which I was really sad about to find that out. I'd worked so hard to get into this school and everything, and then I knew right away, oh no, I'm bad at this, and I don't even like to do it. It's a different thing animating than drawing, it turns out. But I really like designing around it. I like set design and I like prop design and being in the background of all those things. And so that's what I did. I worked at DreamWorks, and I did work at I worked on Coraline for 3 years as a set and prop guy. And then I started to get into books a little bit, but it was concerning because books, you can't do a book about chairs and rocks that you draw. I love drawing sedentary sets and things that don't move. But you can't, that doesn't make a book. I tried. I tried a couple times and it doesn't work. And so my characters that I ended up being able to draw look like rocks and stuff. They're standing there staring at you, wondering what you're going to do with them. And then you don't do much with them. But it was a reaction to not knowing not knowing what to do with characters, because my job had been sets and props and immovable objects. And so my characters kind of look like that. They're just standing in a field wondering, like, what the heck am I doing here? What did I show up for? And that is my feeling with them a lot. I don't know. We're going to find out in the next couple pages, but I've got no idea. I wanted to draw a chair. You're just here because I wasn't allowed to draw a chair. So it was this strange evolution, but I never expected to be on my own with it. I always thought I was going to be on a big team working on something that I didn't conceive of. I'm shocked to find myself more in charge than that.
Yeah. And I think you've created very distinguished characters from the challenges that you've put upon yourself, right? I mean, I think in a great way, there are things that look Jon Klassen, and so you have this visual language from design features that you've done on your characters. Have you felt pressure to remain in that sort of style when you make things?
A little. I feel like just in the last little while, it's become more conscious than I would have liked. And then you kind of react and roar back on something else and try to do it. Or, yeah, I think that's contradictions, right? You do that and you're like, don't know what I'm going to do. I'll turn left here instead. But then also you want to refine what it is you've been up to, and it is yours, and you know that it's yours to a certain extent, and you've built something. And so what else is in that thing that you've built, even if you didn't mean to build it? And so you want to do both. And you don't, here you've got this great audience who, likes this stuff. And so what business is it of yours to turn left? If they like it, your job is to, as I said, kind of entertain them and be good at this or try your best. And so I have both in me somewhere where there's a reaction to break it for the sake of it because it worked, and then also to try it again because, oh God, you like that? Okay, I'll try and do it again. I think that's where it comes in, is I can't do it again. I don't know how. There's this way of making the pictures I have lately where there's all these kind of shapes on a white background, and they'll be like trees and rocks and trucks and stuff. And how I draw them is I'll make like 15 of each and then just circle the best one because I'm not totally in control. And I'm like, well, number 7 turned out the best, I guess. The other ones, I didn't know it, and so you're reacting again. You're like, there's an admission there. Mm-hmm. And so when a book goes well, or when a certain formula seems to go well, or the way you've drawn characters goes well, even if you wanted to, you can't do it again. Not really. And so you have to plan for that. You have to figure out, well, then what can I do without falling on my face or making, wasting their time? And so it's always a little bit of that. But it's heartening to find that even when you think you're turning left and going hard off into the distance and trying something completely new, for me anyway, it seems to come back to the same 5 colors and the same look. I don't know how that happens. You just circle back somehow, and you thought you did something different till the book even comes out, and you're like, oh, wait till they, this is going to be different. And then it's like, no, you did it again. And you're like, the same thing in a good way. Maybe people like it again, but you're like, oh, I guess I'm pretty particular. It turns out, like, I thought I walked away, but I didn't walk away at all. Here I am back in this clearing that I thought I left behind.
Yeah. I mean, it's true. And I think I don't know. I love it. I mean, I love how your characters look.
I like doing them. I think, yeah, it's fun to do it. It's just that what is the creative conversation there? You're like, how long, what your own style and your own stuff that you make. I think you're almost the worst person to analyze it, right? Because it ought to come from a very confusing place, probably. As soon as you begin to realize its actual components, you've probably broken it somehow. You can't use those anymore because you understand it too well.
Yeah, I feel like the thread that connects all artists is that, at least in my experience and from talking to other artists, there's always a point in any artist's life where they're not happy with their work. or they make something and they're just like unsatisfied with it. Does that happen to you?
Oh, all the time. Yeah, I get lucky because I only have to show the ones that I think work. You get 30 books that didn't work, but you only have to show number 31 that you thought actually worked. But there's tons of drafts that don't work, and ideas that you even thought could work, and then you try them for a month, and then they crash into a wall somehow. And it's hard too because the books come out like maybe a year or sometimes longer than that after you finish them, and hopefully in that space of a year you've gotten better, or at least you've changed. And so this thing comes out. And you're like, oh, yeah, that. Oh, man, look at that one page. Like, I totally forgot about that Tuesday afternoon where I just had to get out of the studio a little earlier and just whiffed it. Like, it's such a hard thing to stare down. And then you have to go to gymnasiums in Texas and read them to children. And you're like, and you have to look at it. And you have to look at your own drawing from that Tuesday afternoon and be like, there it is. There's that drawing again. And here you guys are. And like, that part's hard because you're never satisfied. Very rarely are you satisfied with the stuff. I think I'm finding more and more that the less I do in a book, the better I like it. And that's not just because I'm scared of my own work, but I think that there's something in there that like the less marks I've made, the more satisfied I am with the work.
Yeah. I think also just as you get older and mature, I think that you learn not to hold on to things. I mean, it's like perfection becomes the enemy of progress, right?
Yeah.
I think that you're a phenomenal storyteller. And you exist in a medium where people aren't really looking to be challenged by kids' books.
Yeah.
I think the average adult, it just doesn't interact with children's books the way, and like, I didn't even realize it until I had kids. And then I was like, oh my God. Because like, look, The Rock from the Sky is a love story.
I think most of them are love stories. I do think that The Rock from the Sky, I didn't have that first story, The Rock from the Sky. There's 5 stories in that book. And the first one was the titular story where there's a rock falling somewhere above these 2 characters who are arguing about where to stand in a field, not knowing there's a rock falling above them. And so the job became, I thought, how to get them out of the way. The rock can hit the ground, but it shouldn't hit them. That's my goal. How do I believably get that guy out of the way? And I tried all of these, technical ways that a character might cross the stage, motivated to cross the stage when he didn't want to. And none of it was believable. And then I brought in a third character and made the first character jealous. And then he moved. Then he moved and I was like, I buy that. I believe it now. And suddenly it was like, oh, this isn't just this story. What we've established now is these guys love each other and they're not talking about it. And like, then you got a book. Now we're off. And that's how this stuff happens. But they just weren't breathing on their own until then. And I think even with children's books, with all of that stuff, you just got to believe it. It just, if you don't believe it, and when you don't believe it. And kids have the same sensitivity, I think often, or at least it seems to be sometimes, that they're like, well, kids will believe a lot less than you know what I mean? Their bar for belief is maybe lower because they haven't been around as long. I don't know what the calculation is there. But no, if you don't believe it, they won't believe it. It's just people. And so you got to believe it yourself. Why would he move? Why would he move away from his favorite spot? Why would he do it? I got to believe it too. And so it turned into, unless the stakes are literally love, he doesn't move. And yeah, then it turned into, and they never admit it to each other how much they just kind of hurt each other in small minor ways, and I've had relationships like that where it's like, I'm not going to tell you how much I like you. Instead, I'm just going to like shove you emotionally every now and then. Like, it's not a healthy relationship. It's not a good way to go about it, but they exist. And kids have these too. Kids are like, you watch kids in schoolyards and stuff, and there are multiple, like there are so many variations of a relationship where it's like, you say that to your kids sometimes. It's like, well, they hit me, they threw a rock at my head. And it's like, he's probably just trying to get your attention because he likes you. That's a version of a kid's relationship.
Yeah.
And so it's not just like, if you're friends, you'll share. It's like, sometimes if you want to be friends, you throw an eraser at their head and you don't know what else to do to follow up. Like, that's the best you had. And like, that's a book. That's at least a chapter, right? It's just that move.
Yeah.
Triangle is about that. The Shapes book you talked about is that he wakes up in the morning wanting to play a trick on Square. And that's the whole book, is he crosses this massive landscape to do it. But why do you do that? Why do you wake up being like, oh, I got such a good one to play on Square this morning? It's because you want to see him. You're finding reasons to call, right? And like, that's just how they love each other. Of course they do, but we're not going to say it. That's the least interesting way to say it. We're going to show it. We're going to spend 30 pages showing him crossing a massive landscape to scare him by making a snake sound. The worse the prank in that book, the worse the reason for him to go over there, actually, the greater the expression of love, I think, is that he needed next to nothing to walk all day. He just needed the smallest of reasons to finally go over there and see him. It's a love story. Most of them are. It's,
Yeah. And it's, I think, because I'm also a person who I don't really read fiction. I don't think I'm too cool for it. There's nothing like that. But, I didn't have the more traditional higher academic experience. I basically jumped into books as a way to protect myself initially because of just, I need to learn the things I don't know. So therefore, I'm going to read all of this nonfiction because, oh, shoot, I don't know about the history of this. I'm not familiar with this. I'm not, and it wasn't until maybe the past 10 or 15 years that I became more comfortable reading fiction because of what it could do to me emotionally.
Right.
Because otherwise I looked at books as like food in a way. And it's like, oh, well, I really need to understand World War II more. So I'm going to read these 10 books. And then I feel I can talk from this perspective and this perspective. And then I know about A, B, and C. And now, okay, now I feel safe. I can, exist throughout the world because I know that book they're talking about.
Yeah, I think that you can do the same thing. It's not quite the same thing, but there is the word safe, though, comes into this too, in that, like, the thing we were talking about where you're like, this is a day that happens sometimes, or this is a feeling that you get sometimes without passing judgment on it or without saying, and when that happens, this is how you're supposed to act, but just acknowledging the phenomenon of that feeling or of that kind of a day or of that kind of a relationship. Just describing it is the same thing, is that like you've had these relationships. Are you weird for having had them or for having felt that way? The book is telling you no, they exist. And there's a safety there too. And if the more empathetic and the more gently you can put it, or the more grace that's in that expression, the greater the education where you're like, again, now I'm safe. Okay. That then someone else has been here too, or something like this is a thing that happens. And so I think it is all just looking for safety. You're just, that's just a different version of it. But I'd never heard it put that way about reading nonfiction, where now there's a safety in it, where now I'm safe for a while anyway, right?
Well, yeah. I mean, even in, I'm not trying to get political in any way, where like things have felt weird. And so I, as a way to protect myself, I was like, okay, I'm going to basically really try to study every single instance of where things that look like they've never happened before have happened in a way or have existed in a way.
Yeah. The reassurance of that to find out that these arcs have happened.
Yeah. And I think that there's a tiny bit of comfort in there. There's less comfort when you see that they haven't ever happened that way. But there is a bit of comfort in knowing that, like, oh, okay, like I'll just make this up, where Senator Huey Long, who was very much against the New Deal, when FDR was going crazy, and and then you had like Father Tom Coughlin, who was like the Rush Limbaugh before Rush Limbaugh existed, this priest that had a radio show and he reached everyone. Like, you're like, oh, there has been different types of people who have felt emboldened by this or this that existed, 100 years ago.
Yeah. And these aren't necessarily new events. They aren't unknowable, or at least people aren't as mysterious as that, right? Like this is, we can kind of track this stuff, even though it might not go that way this time. Yeah, I definitely get that.
I don't know. And so anyway, I mean, I digress, but I think that's initially where most of my time spent reading was in this way to also, and I didn't go to college at all. I just studied music and, lived in New York and was trying to do all that. And so there was also a part of me that felt like I had to overcompensate for things. I'm like hanging out with my buddy who went to Harvard and knows all this and this. And I'm like, oh shit, I need to, if he's going to mention, chaos theory, whatever, I don't know. I need to get my ducks in a row here,
I have that for sure. I was going to go to university I applied for English Lit and for writing and for just like literature courses and stuff. And I went to school for animation instead. And like, we just sat there arguing about whether, Wolverine could beat Spider-Man or something. Like there weren't big discussions happening. I promised myself when I didn't go to school for that stuff, for literature, that I would read on my own. And I did. I read as much as the schedule would allow, or at least as much as I could get interested in doing it. But I'm very limited. I'm not as well read as a lot of folk. And you hang out and you go to book conferences, you hang out with authors these people have read, and so you're winging it a little bit through there. But I found people that really influenced the writing, and I felt lucky for that. But I think it was just like I wonder all the time what else would have happened to my work if I had actually read as well as a lot of folks I know. the ones I did read changed me. So what would have happened if I'd gotten a lot more of that done? I don't know. Yeah, I think you are always insecure about that. I don't feel competitive about it. I just feel kind of sad about doors in my own brain that didn't get opened.
Well, what do you read now?
I'm all over the place now. I'm constantly in the business of catching up. As you are, like, you just kind of go back and you're like, oh, I never read that big one, so let's go back and read it. I do like nonfiction. I think it's an interesting time for nonfiction. Like you're saying, there's lots to try and untangle or at least understand. And so I toggle. I usually have, I've recently gotten back into short stories a lot. I think if I ever write anything that isn't illustrated or necessarily for children, it would be a bunch of short stories. I've always been super into short stories, which I guess tracks from writing short books.
Sure.
But I've rediscovered it again. I don't know what, I think it was the last book that Dennis Johnson wrote before he died, the Largesse of the Sea Maiden, which was a collection of short stories. I reread it again. He died only a couple of years ago, I guess. I can't remember how many now. And I'd read all of his other stuff, but that one I go back to the most for some reason. I like so many of his books, but that collection of short stories, there's a sound in it. It's so often a sound. It's so often a voice. It's like I can't even tell you what happened in the stories that I really like, but I'm just so into when an author just sounds great. You just want to sit in the sound, and it can go anywhere. It doesn't even really matter what happens. You just want to hang out in this beautiful, sound that they've found.
Was there ever an artist or author that you struggled to understand?
When I was a kid, I didn't like Maurice Sendak very much, and it comes up these days because he spends time in children's books, and there's a lot of and he's I think about him a lot. He was unbelievable, and like technically, and just what he was breaking through emotionally and stuff. But I was scared to death of him when I was a kid. I remember that book. I remember seeing Where the Wild Things Are and In the Night Kitchen and thinking, it's so heavy. There's something super heavy about this. And I don't want to put myself through it almost. Like I was much more into the lighter Go Dog Go and like those kinds of books that were just kind of jokey. I love joke books and I like that lighter stuff. And when I saw Sendak, I remember seeing him in like third grade. They had him, you know how books are like on top of the shelves in like a display way in the library? Mm-hmm. They had the Sendak stuff like that. And I remember looking at the cover, standing, looking at it of Where the Wild Things Are, being like, something's up. I can't go in there yet. I can't do it. And I know I've never been, you spend so much time in children's literature and you analyzing this stuff, but I know he's never been my guy. And I've always felt bad about it because he's like one of the greats. And I know that, and I know it intellectually, and I know it even artistically. And it's just, I've always felt bad that he wasn't, he was too scary for me. I was too much of a delicate flower because he was really pouring it out. He was laying it bare in those books somehow. And it was just too much for Lil Jon to hold. I try to do that a little bit. I try to take care of that kid when I'm making stuff too, is that you want to be edgy and ride the edges of what, might be interesting, but I never want to hand them too much. I always err. I think that, again, that's why you stop, is like, I don't want to bleed out too much for them to the audience. And that's not because I think, that's not necessarily a comment on what I think children can hold. It's what I want any audience to be able to hold. It's what I want the characters to hold. We were talking earlier about character, and it was like, I think of them a lot as actors. And I've never directed anything, but you do hear about actors or directors talking about like, how did you get there? How did you cry in that scene? And like, well, I just thought about my dog getting hit by a car or something. And like you picture those conversations where the director's like, you got to cry today. You got to cry all day today, actually. Like, so get there, try to get there. Yeah. And I've never wanted to ask my audience or my drawings or myself to get there. Like, why? It feels bad to ask them to do that. You can get them there dramatically and be like, this did happen. There was a horrible day, but I'm not going to ask you to go there. I'm not going to draw you there, and I'm not going to put myself there. I've been there. We've been there. You get there, but I don't want to. I don't want to sit in it. We can imply that it happened and then move on. Like I do think of them that way.
So, I'm the things that you do to kind of recharge you. You're quite the runner now. When did you get into running?
Only a couple of years ago. I'd tried for years to be a runner. I always wanted to be one. I just like the elegance of it. I biked for a long time. All of my exercise and like anything active I did through high school, through college was always, I would get on my bike. I loved my bike. And I would go on long, long rides. And I thought I was a bike guy. And I am a bike guy. I can't break up with it. But living in Los Angeles, it's not a great bike town. On the outskirts, no, it is. That you take your life in your hands too often. And I was getting so bummed by putting my bike in my car to then drive it to a trail. And so we live pretty close to a reservoir here. And I can't remember what finally did it. I think it was one of those programs, right? One of those 5K programs. And it just caught one time.
Oh,
One time I finally kind of broke through, whatever it is that gets you off one too many times off the couch. And I liked it finally. And I finally found out it's different than I thought. All of the stuff that I do physically, like I wasn't a physical kid. I don't think. I was always told I wasn't, because I don't know if other kids went through this, but if you can draw, they kind of tell you, well, then you don't need to. And actually you're bad at this by definition, the physical stuff.
Yeah.
And so I was never a sporty kid.
You're an art kid.
Teams.
You're not an athlete.
Yeah, you don't have to, or at least whatever the excuse is. And so your idea of yourself is just like, well, I don't then. And so it took a while, but I found running was different than I thought it was. It wasn't the same. I thought it was just like an hour of like maximum exertion. That's what I always pick. Like, that's what it feels like when you start. You're like, this is just trying hard for 20 minutes, like all the time. And until you get through where it's not that way, or when you learn how to do it a little better, and it's not that way, it's different. And I also found that I was working stuff out. I felt better. I felt mentally better. It was doing work that I didn't know how to do for myself in any other way.
Oh, wait, let's talk about that. What?
I don't even know what more to say about it. You just, like, I remember I hurt myself in January. I hurt my knee. I was running down hills when I didn't know about that you shouldn't do that, it turns out. And so I got runner's knee or whatever they call it. And I had to stop running for like a month. And I found like, oh no, I didn't even know how much like stuff I'd been offloading to running, just anxiety stuff, or like I just dealing with things, which are, it's just the buildup. It's nothing massive. It's just the usual stuff. And I think it was doing a lot more house cleaning running. And I wasn't out there thinking about stuff. I don't know if you are when you go running. I'm not out there like actively, doing equations on whatever's going on. But you come back feeling like you did something, like you were, something's a little better than it was. And I think it feels good to do that and to know it so definitively that you are a little better than you were when you left. You've done something objectively positive for yourself. It's not often you can say that, right? How many things can you say that about? And I think doing that over and over again as a habit just helps with everything. And so when I wasn't doing it, I was bummed out more than I expected to be. And I didn't know how much I'd been offloading to that until I stopped for a bit.
I'm in a group chat with you.
Yeah.
Where we talk about the perfect sport coat. And I'm curious if we could elaborate a little bit this to listeners, because I know you've been in search, and especially and I'll say this for listeners, I've known Jon for a bit, and as you're hearing how he approaches and thinks of problems, opportunities per se, is very different than other people I know. And seeing how you get into menswear and how you're trying to, find the best jacket, and how, it's fascinating to me. So I'm curious if you could explain.
It's a moving target, I think, isn't it? Or maybe it's not. But
no,
I feel like everybody isn't this everyone's relationship with clothes? If you're interested in clothes, you're searching, but you're searching for so many things at once, right? You're searching for your idea of yourself. And like, there are moments when you find something that like you like, or a fabric that you like, even where you're like, that's me. It's just a picture of my face. Like, that's what it is. And you don't know why you feel that way about it. And there's probably lots of interesting threads as to, tying to why it is you emotionally respond to that stuff. And so you're like, oh, and there is an interesting thing, I think, going on as you get older too, where as there's this George Saunders book that I talk about a lot, about writing Russian short stories, actually. And he analyzes them, called A Swim in the Pond in the Rain. And he has a bit about writing where he's like, you won't even necessarily, when you really find your voice, you won't even really necessarily be the thing that you wish you could write. You've got guys in your head or authors in your head that you've always wanted to be, and you're not necessarily going to write those kinds of things. You're going to do differently. It's just that's what you're best at. Whatever you produce, just find out what that is, and you might not even agree with it. It might be surprising what works. And I feel like clothes are kind of the same way, where you're like, like I wouldn't have picked that off the rack, but like that is what I'm supposed to wear. You know what I mean? Like there's an incongruency there, and that's such a tricky relationship too. And so for the jacket, you're like, have I just seen, people who wear jackets who are wearing what they're supposed to wear? And you're like, well, that whole thing looks like it's working. But it's very interesting to analyze like what it is you do and don't look for in a jacket. I remember there's a line in James Bond in Casino Royale where he's on a train with the girl who's gonna, be the love interest for the rest of it, and they're sizing each other up about what they're wearing, I think. And she's talking about his suit, and she goes, I can't remember the line, something along the lines of like, the suit is perfect, but you wear it with such disdain that you can tell you don't come from money, or something like that.
Yeah.
And I remember lighting up at that line, being like, yeah. I don't think I think I wear clothes with disdain. Like, I think Mac would agree with that too, where it's like, I got to beat it up a little bit, or there has to be something almost off of what it's supposed to be. Like, I have a very tricky relationship with it where it's, of course, you want it to fit and you want it to be nice and all that stuff. But also, I kind of want to flip the middle finger to it a little bit, to this whole thing, to my need of it, to all of it. And like, what does that mean? What's going on there? And like, that doesn't serve my purpose. Aesthetically, probably doesn't look as good as it could if it was correct, but it's always a little bit incorrect. I don't know. And so the jacket thing is hard, right? Because as soon as it's correct, you're like, well, that's not right. It's got to be broken somehow. Well, I don't know what that is.
I think for me, like, there's always been this weird concept of shame in me liking really nice clothes, because a part of me is like, well, I didn't necessarily come from money. It's not even, I didn't come from money. And so sometimes if I'm wearing something that's nice, I feel a tiny bit embarrassed by it.
Yes.
But I got it because I love it. I care about it. It's, I'm trying to learn about myself and express myself in what I'm wearing. But I'm also aware of the signals it might be signaling if I'm, wearing like a nice sort of bespoke jacket or whatever somewhere. And so I'm always in battle with, basically I'm always in battle with like equipping myself and feeling good about myself, but also feeling a tiny bit ashamed that I care this much and I want to look this good.
There's massive shame in it. I think that, the negotiation with that is like the whole thing, it feels like. My grandfather, my dad's dad, the more I think about him, the more it clarifies, I think, what a certain unified theory to all of this anyway. He was a sewer truck driver. His whole job was that he owned a sewer cleaning truck of his own, and he would go to various towns around Ontario for long stretches and clean the sewers and come back. And they lived in a tiny little house in St. David's, Ontario, which is between Niagara Falls and Niagara-on-the-Lake. It's like a one intersection town. And I remember his closet was full. He had beautiful, or at least he loved clothes in my memory. He loved clothes. But he was a deeply working class guy. They had no money and 5 kids, and he drove a sewer truck. And they went to church. There was a church down the road. We used to go to church with them. And I found out after he died that, like, I was asking about this because he would sing in the choir box too. He was up there with the robes and everything. Awesome. And I remember, like, years after he died, I remember asking somebody about that. And they were like, well, your grandpa didn't necessarily believe in God. He loved to sing. He liked to get dressed up and he liked to go sing in front of people. That was why they went to church. And also, he loved a suit. He loved getting gussied up, or what I think he said, like getting fancy or something like that. And like he had no problem. There was no conflict. It didn't feel like, in my memory, to the guy who would drive around, but also owning a bunch of suits. And he had bolo ties. He had like 50 bolo ties, and he would comb his hair and keep a mustache. Ties. Yeah. Whoa. And like, he just looked great. He was always very debonair, and like, just, he took care of his appearance. He smoked like a chimney, and he died at like 65 because he smoked, like, he looked like his health was terrible. But all of the superficial stuff, he was of that, he owned a nice pair of shoes and like a couple suits. And it was like that. He was very thin because he'd had his stomach surgery when he was from the smoking or something. And so he looked very drawn and thinner as he got older. The way when I started running, I was like, oh, look at that. Look at me in there. I'm basically like, I look a lot like him, it's helpful to see that happen, right? But it also was clarifying, was like, is that how he wore clothes? Is this the way where it's just like, you don't mind getting dressed up and going out to dinner? And it's as simple as that. Like, there's no shame in that necessarily, right? Like, you feel good about it. It's fun to put on nice stuff and go out for the evening. And so, like, can it be that simple? Why do we have to have this like huge, labyrinth of emotions about clothes and finding ourselves in them, where it's just like, just want a nice jacket to take my wife out to dinner and like, just want to look nice. Like, but whatever that version is, it is so interesting how the subtleties of like the fabric and the cut and like what the lapel is doing and stuff, it speaks to you emotionally. You're reacting to crushes that you have on things and what's going on there and like, why? And I think, you've got a couple different people you're thinking about that you'd like to be, or I don't know what it is, why the search is there. I had a jacket made for that award we were talking about at the top.
Yeah.
And it's pretty close. It's really nice. It's a wool one. It's just this beautiful navy jacket that fits just right, because it was the first made to order jacket I ever had, and it was like, oh yeah, that's how it's supposed to go. That was the revelation of it too, is that it's not, at least in my mind, you want to vanish into it. You don't want it to look conspicuous or like like everyone's coming up to me like, what a jacket. I want to vanish into the wall. Just make me look like I put a jacket on, please. Like, that's what I want. Yeah.
I always look for what I like to call like nice but forgettable style, in the sense that like I look nice, but I don't really want everyone to know exactly what I wore. And not even because I'm worried about like copying or anything, but it's like I don't want to look so nice that people are like, wow, Jeremy wore this. Where it's like, I don't know, you had like a nice thing on, I think. Yeah, it was. And
I'm
like,
sure
perfect.
You look great.
That's how I
exactly. Yeah, right. There's this Wendell Berry line he wrote an essay about Amish people, I think, and he has a great quote that applies to so much creative, but also to this, where they were talking about how they were like, it's so funny being Amish in the United States because so much of the American personality is like trying to find yourself. And he goes, we're trying to lose ourselves. And I thought that was great. And I really related to it. I'm from a Mennonite. My background is Mennonite, and so it's not far off aesthetically from all that stuff. But there was something about wearing clothes too, where it's like, I'm not looking to find myself in here, or at least that's not how I'd put it. You're looking to settle back into it and just, to lose yourself in it. Because you know who you are. That doesn't need proving. So let's just settle in. Let's just, exactly that. Don't remember. Yeah.
Well, and now too, I mean, I'll order clothes, and it's funny because, I've been buying and ordering suits for well over a decade now.
Yeah.
And I'll look at, I'll go and I'll try on some of the stuff I had. And apart from it not fitting the way I wanted my body, now I'm like, why did I ever wear clothes so tight? I was like, why was this so slim? What was I thinking? Or I'll be like, yeah, you know what? That tailor never worked for me because they always cut it really tight. And I remember I went and saw this tailor recently, and he was like, well, that was what you wanted though. And I was like, oh shit. He was like, no, here. And he pulls out his measurements. He's like, look, Jeremy Kirkland, 2012, 2013. And you wanted it this length. You wanted it this. You wanted it this. And he's like, that's fine if you want it different now. And because I was like, oh, I want it longer. I want it bigger. And he's like, but, he's like, what you were wearing at the time was what you wanted. And I was like, damn, how can I trust myself?
Yeah. There is a shame in that, right? There is that. You know what it makes me think of? I remember when I was younger, I watched, I loved The Shawshank Redemption. Everyone loves Shawshank Redemption. But I remember thinking that it was such a great idea in that movie because you span decades, right? In this prison with these two guys. And they don't change very much. They change a little bit, the two main characters. But the warden, he's the villain of the film, changes a lot. Whenever you see him again, he has adapted to the style of the time outside the prison. His suit's different. His glasses are different. He is a stylish, of the moment man, or at least as far as he's concerned. And I remember sewing those two things together to be like, there is something evil in it. Like, this is correct. This fits this villain, that he is vain enough to keep up with this and to be popping in and out of our scenes with these two consistent guys who, have been issued a uniform. And so they're not even allowed to keep up with anything. And here's this guy who has the freedom to do it. And there's something immoral about it, or it fits this villain idea. And I don't know whether it fit it or whether that was just because the movie worked that way and it was sewn together in my mind. But there is this thing where you're like, oh man, I'm moving with the times. But like, you kind of, what choice do you have? You are going to change. I do that with studio space here, where it took me a long time. I remember the first few rotations where I would work at home for 3 or 4 years and then want a studio space outside somewhere that you just rent. It doesn't change the work. You don't need it. But for some reason, I would just be like, oh man, I want to get out of the house for a little bit, and you go rent one. And for the first few times that would change over, I remember feeling like, I don't know myself. I wish I knew myself better. And I didn't have to change this all the time. Like, why can't I figure out what kind of creative person I am? Why can't I just have a setup and know that that's my setup? Why do I keep having to change this? And now I feel like this is just how it feels. You do this for a while and then you change it, and then that exhausts itself, and then you change it again. And it's not that you don't know yourself. It's just that, time passes and you're going through it. And it's as simple as that. But I don't know why it feels different to apply it to clothes, because you do go back and you're like, what was I thinking? But yeah, I don't know. I don't know why those two things can't connect. Why can't I be kinder to myself on the other end of it? Why does it feel vain instead of just, why can't you be nicer to yourself about it?
Yeah, I know. Are there any pieces of clothing that you've had that you still see yourself reaching for?
Oh man, that's an interesting question. I wore Chucks for the longest time. My feet are really narrow. And I still like my feet, it probably conformed my feet. I wore them since, high school. Just that was it. They went with everything. And they're also a bit of that middle finger thing to whatever's going on, right? No matter what you put on, if you're wearing Chucks, it felt like, well, I'm going to keep a bit of this
It's
to
punk
myself.
rock. Yeah.
I'm the least punk rock guy, so I don't think that would be the term I would put on top of it. But there was something about it was like, and I'm just comfortable in them. I knew how to put them on. I also just wore a hat since I was in 7th grade, every day, all the time, for the same reasons, I think. But also, you said the word like signal like a little while ago, which is a big part of it, is that like if you are in the business of being something of a storyteller or communicating anything at all, which you are too, you are in the business of symbols and signals to your audience or to whoever is going to be receiving what you're putting out. And I remember I started wearing a hat in earnest, like all the time when I moved. We moved from Toronto to Niagara Falls to a school that was a lot rougher than the one I'd grown up in. And I was horribly unhappy in this new school. I didn't fit in at all, and I wasn't up to it. I wasn't tough enough for it. And I didn't know anybody. It was a tiny school anyway. And this guy came up to me like on day 5, and he he had a Statue of Liberty haircut, which was that he'd shaved his head and spiked the front bangs only that were left. And he was wearing an Aerosmith Get a Grip t-shirt and ripped up stuff, and he had piercings all over the place. And he came up to me in the schoolyard, and I was just kicking rocks by myself, day 5, not knowing what to do. And he comes up and he goes, "You're John," or no, "You're Jonathan," which I am. And I said, "Yeah." And he goes, "I'm Donald. You can call me Don." And it was like, it was the most graceful thing that had ever happened to me. I couldn't believe how nice it was that he said that right away, to call him Don. It was like at my lowest moment, here was a guy it was the smallest gesture, right? Call me Don. And I went by John from there on out and I was like, I'm going to do that for whatever capacity I have to do that. And I'm not, Donald. I'm not this intimidating creature in this world that he fits into, but however I can do that for people, to say, call me John, or to at least to start it that way. And I think the hat is part of that too. There's an informality about it. It's not a big deal. I'm still wearing a hat, where there's a symbol of that, to be like, it's okay. Really that. Like, and I don't know how that fits in, why my brain calculates hat means that, but it has, and it did right away. I started wearing a hat then too, to be like, but it's also protective. It's like what you're talking about. There's a safety in it. It's my little thing. And so I get to take it wherever I want. But there's a dual meaning to it, where it's also like, let's all just settle down a little bit. I've still got a hat on.
Yeah, I mean, I think clothing can be very, very disarming. And I think too, where a lot of times, I have this old yellow hat that I've worn for well over a decade. I have maybe like, I don't know, there's probably like 8 over there on my shelf. And it's this yellow Ted Drew's frozen custard hat. And it's a really ugly hat. The colors are nothing about it makes sense in terms of how it's designed. It's just kind of kitschy. But I liked it because it's so kind of weird and obnoxious. It's like just this weird yellow hat. And I've worn it for ages. And then, I liked that. I was like, oh, I'll wear this with a sport coat. I'll wear it with a suit. And it kind of dressed down what I was wearing. And, for me, I wanted to look like I didn't take myself too seriously. I wanted to look like approachable. And, it's still very crazy to me. It's like how much clothes can be so disarming in a really good way, where it's like, oh, yeah, okay, there's that guy. Oh, you know what? He doesn't look that intimidating. He's got like a little hat on. It looks like an ice cream stand. Like, okay, I'll go talk to this guy. He seems normal.
I feel like this is an old thing, though. This is an old tradition of doing this, is that like, across the desert, 2 cowboys riding towards each other, you are in the business of symbols before you get close enough to be in firing range. And like, that's what we're doing. We're signaling to each other, even in passing, even just in the street walking by, like what we're up to and what we believe and what we think of ourselves and what we think the world might be. All of that, you're somehow doing it, or it gets interesting when you start to anyway. All of that stuff is in there in these micro decisions and your reactions to cuts or fabrics or all that stuff. It's signals, it's symbols, and you don't even know of what. You couldn't write it down, or at least I can't. But like, and so you flail, right? Because those things are murky, and you're like, is this what it is? This feels warmer to what I think and what I feel? And so that's why maybe the calculations are murky, and you find yourself cutting suits 5 different ways over the course of 10 years, is that you were getting warmer. But like, yeah, there was another piece I just remembered that when you said that about things you've been wearing for years. I had a gray sweatshirt, a gray, like old, like, raglan sweatshirt, like,
nice,
that I wore when I moved here. And I met my wife and it was back like she was a photographer. She likes to take lots of photographs with an old camera. And when we got married, we had to go. I'm Canadian and she's American, so I was getting my residency, and you have to go to the courthouse or the immigration office to prove that your relationship isn't a sham, that you didn't get married for visa reasons. And the best way they have of doing that is to sit you down and interview you and believe you or not believe you. But they also ask you to bring pictures of the length of your relationship so you can prove you've been around each other for as long as you say you have. And so they brought in these pictures, and I'm wearing that sweatshirt in all of them. Like it looked like the same day. And the guy was like, how long have you been together? And we're like, we've been together like 8 years. And they're like, I don't. And she's like, he wears the same sweatshirt a lot. Like, it doesn't look correct. Like, it was one of those ones where it just showed up in every single picture. And I don't even think of myself as having like a little uniform, but I think that I'm happiest when I do. When you get those phases where you're like, oh, I can do this for a year or even more. And I'm happiest when I have my little uniform where there's like, and now what it's turned into, I think, with clothes is that I think I'm figuring out the uniform for now anyway. But I'm really interested in small variations in that. So it's like, I like a light blue shirt and I like a navy jacket and a pair of pants that does this kind of thing. But it doesn't stop you from acquiring new things. You just want variations on that. You're like, oh, that's a nice light blue shirt. And you have like 50 of them. And like, that's really silly and stupid too. Can't you be the minimalist you'd like to be about all of that? Can't you have the actual closet that looks like you have a uniform?
I'm in the same boat where the amount of oversized Brooks Brothers Oxford shirts I'll get only to get it and be like, man, you know what? This reminds me of this other one that I have. Yeah. Oh, I'm going to wear that. And then you hang the other one up and you're just like, it's like I buy things to let them marinate in my closet, only to pull out what I hadn't worn in 3 months because I was reminded of it by what I just bought.
I love packing for a trip that way because we go on trips a lot for work and stuff. And what you find yourself packing on the day, the impulse where you think like 2 days ago, my suitcase in my mind looked much different. And what is this new thing I'm throwing in here off the cuff? Like, that's ridiculous. I'm not going to wear that but like just the art of packing for it too. And like, again, paring it down to who you are today. What does your little overnight bag look like today? It's different than it will look like next week. And why is that? Why does that feel weaker? Why do you want it to be the same instead? Mac sent me a picture I think about all the time when it comes to these kinds of discussions. And it's a picture of a row of sport coats sitting, like hanging on a wooden rack against like a wooden wall. It was a beautiful picture. And it was like 8 jackets, I think, maybe less. They're beautiful, like these tweeds and wools and these great looking coats. And he's like, whose rack this is a writer's jacket like rack. Whose do you think this is? Oh. And I was like, oh, I've got no idea. Like, that's a great question. And I looked at it for a long time. And he knew I was reading a lot of Dennis Johnson, but I didn't think Dennis Johnson was, the pictures I'd seen of him, he wasn't wearing jackets like that. And I was like, is it Dennis Johnson? And he goes, no, it's Cormac McCarthy. And it was in his house or somewhere, like I guess he lived in New Mexico. He lived in the Santa Fe Institute for a long time. I think he actually did live there, or he worked there or something. And so this was his rack. And I was like, man, that's so cool. Of course, like, he had like 8, these solid, 6 or 7 jackets. And that's such an indicative thing of his personality. And then Max said, you think that, but he actually was a massive hoarder of sport coats. He owned more than 600 of them, and they were all in storage somewhere. And these were the ones he had on his rack when he died. But he had this massive cache of them somewhere else, and he was obsessed. He would buy them like he was insatiable about these things. And he was searching all the time, I guess, was how I took it. But I remember so clearly my journey, through those facts, right? To be like, oh, here's this minimalist desert writer, the man we all think of and all that kind of stuff. And then my picture of him was so cohesive and set for those first few minutes. And then Max said, no, he had like a warehouse of them. And then you had to adjust and swing over to this new picture of the guy. And that's just so interesting. I found that, like, I just held on to that story because it's so true to life, it feels like, or at least I told him it was a very dangerous thing to hear, right? Because like, okay, now I have permission to be this insane hoarder and directionless in my choosing of this stuff too.
Yeah, there is a photographer named Massimo Listri who is he's a Florentine photographer, and he's really famous for just doing like, shoots big, medium format, or large format, like just interiors. And usually there's nothing in there. He will shoot like a roof of like an old Florentine building or something. But he more or less exclusively always has a navy jacket on in all of his images. Yeah. And he worked with Antonio Liverano, who is a Florentine tailor. And essentially he's got like 3 or 4 dozen of these navy jackets that are all just one tiny hair off from each other. Where it's like one is a heavyweight cashmere.
Yeah.
One is a very lightweight hopsack.
Yeah.
One is a, flannel. One, just every variation you can imagine. And they're all navy jackets.
That's where I'm getting to. It's hard to explain to people who don't have that kind of, like, who haven't settled into that kind of rhythm. I have to explain it a lot around the house. Like, why are there, like, literally that many navy jackets? It's just like, well, the jacket has to be navy. Like, that's immovable. And it's like, does it? That's immovable? And you're like, yes, it's immovable. When I got that jacket measured for that award thing earlier, I went back to the place afterwards and walked right in and zeroed in on this, like, as I said, that was a wool one, and there was a cotton that they have hanging on the rack, and I was like, oh my God, that's such a great fabric, and I was really into it, and I was just, responding in that mysterious way you do to some fabrics, I guess. And the guy who measured me was there, and we chatted about this stuff, and he was like, well, yeah, but that would be another navy jacket. And I think I looked at him in a way that he was like, okay, that's not what we're talking about. Like, another navy jacket it is. Like, that wasn't the discussion. I was like, well, yeah, of course it's another navy jacket. What are you talking about? And he showed me all these other fabrics, and there were these, brown ones and everything else. But I was like, no, there's no question in my mind that another navy jacket is useful to me.
You and I both. And I think, I was like, this one's more of a travel jacket. Oh, this one's a lot more of a, this is a hardier jacket I can beat up. And it's...
Do you think, though, that in that, like, in all those minor variations, are you looking for the perfect one? Do you suspect that it's out there somewhere? Or are you actually looking for a life where you rotate through 14 navy jackets?
Fair question. I'm looking to essentially maybe have 3.
Right. That's nice.
I have I think I've whittled my tailoring down to maybe 12 to 15 sport coats.
Yeah.
And I think I probably need to buy another 5 or 10 to know that I have like 3 or 4 winners.
Right. That's the math. That's the indescribable math, right? Yeah. And what are you doing, right? Like, what is it? Is it how you think you look in the jacket, or is it something about the jacket itself? Is it an objective piece? I guess it's both, but it's so personal, and I think that's why it's kind of like you do feel shame about it. Is because you're admitting that you don't quite know yet, right? You don't quite know.
Yeah, and the only way to know, and this is not me trying to promote consumerism here, but the only way to know is to own it. You cannot, when people are like, oh, I looked at this and I tried it on, I'm like, no. You got to buy it. You need to buy it and then wear it and then be forced to wear it in different occasions and forced to, because there's one guy that I used to work with, and I used to do like styling and stuff. And he had essentially 3 copies of his wardrobe, depending on how he wanted it to fit and how his weight was fluctuating. And I'll be honest, his weight did not fluctuate that much. maybe 10 pounds.
Right.
But he wanted it like, oh, if I want to wear it a little loose, or if I want to wear a sweater underneath, or if I want to wear it with a t-shirt, he had it cut that many ways. And I was like, dude, you're doing it wrong.
Yeah, that's not how... I don't even know. That takes more knowing of yourself. Well, is that how you'd put it? Is that like there's more consciousness there? Like, it really is a mood thing. Like, you don't know how you're going to feel about it, and like what you do choose to go out that night with. What is the jacket? And like, what are you calculating? What are you doing when you, like, is it your idea of yourself that day? Is it your idea of what you'd like it to be? Like, what is it? What are you doing when you're standing at your closet being like, that's the one for tonight? Like, it's so weird and personal and murky for me.
Yeah, it's painful, but the only way out is through.
Yeah. Yeah. And then how do you, like, it's the same thing though. It's like, this is what making creative work is like, is that like when you go back and the tailor shows you, you wanted it that way. It's the same thing as like reading your books from like 2012 where you're like, I did want it that way. I fought hard for that. And like, I don't like it as much anymore. Like, you have to live with those things because they were you then. And like, I don't know. It's probably best to be nicer to yourself than that. But you do feel that way about the work so often, and that this is the same thing.
Yeah.
It's the same stuff. It's the same calculations, is that you're just kind of flailing and guessing at who you might be and who you want to be.
Well,
the painful part is when it begins to make some sense, is when you do find the jacket you're talking about and you're like, oh, this actually makes lots of stuff make sense. That's the part where you're like, uh-oh, I think I just signed up again for this whole adventure, right? Where you're like, now I know that this actually works. Sometimes, every now and then, this does make sense of something that I didn't know was even confused for a while. And the work can do that too, where you're like, oh, okay, I didn't even know I had that in me. On your better moments, it surprises you and you're like, oh, okay, yeah, that I'm okay, right?
Yeah. I mean, I was going to say, I think that's, at least you kind of realize you're just like everyone else.
Thank God. Yeah.
Well, Jon, this has been awesome. Thank you so much. It was good chatting with you.
Thanks so much for having me on. This was a blast.
All right, see ya. Thanks so much for listening. You've been listening to Blammo. Our show is produced by Blammo Media. We're edited by Amar Lal, and our theme music by the mysterious Breakmaster Cylinder. Special thanks to Jon Klassen for coming on. By the way, if you like what you heard, leave us a review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify or whatever dingledorp thing is that you're listening to us on. If you really love the show, which hopefully you do, subscribe to us on Patreon, where you can, there's so much good stuff on there, but we have our members-only Slack group. We also have exclusive shows from Die Workwear, hosted by Derek Guy and Peter Zatolo, as well as the Triple J Show. And there's even some solo pods and stuff in there. There's all sorts of good stuff. But if you want to really lock in, just join us over on Patreon. So thanks so much, everybody. We will see you soon.